Hello, good afternoon, and welcome. Welcome to another edition of Attlas Information Live. I'm your host, Attlas Alex, and today, if it's not clear from the background, we're going to be addressing the topic of fear and the present condition that the world finds itself in. As I'm sure you are aware of the headlines and the events that are unfolding in the Middle East. These events, it can be said, are a direct result of humanity's perpetual enslavement to fear. And the events that are unfolding and how they are unfolding are fueling a great deal of speculation of worsening scenarios and many worst case scenarios. And many of those speculative outcomes are likewise being fueled by none other than fear. And as I have shared many, many times on this channel, of course, during and since the global pandemic, the so-called COVID-19 pandemic, I have made it clear many times that that event, as it unfolded around the world, was first and foremost a referendum on fear. If there was ever any doubt in anyone's mind as to the prevalence of fear and fear's hold over this humanity, COVID should have removed all doubt in anyone's mind that this humanity is saturated, so steeped in fear that a condition, an ailment that was no deadlier than seasonal flu, statistically speaking, the statistics bore it out that whatever COVID was or wasn't, the actual illness itself was no more fatal than seasonal flu. And that it was so blown out of proportion that, I mean, I don't have to run down everything that we were put through. Everything from lockdowns to mask mandates to travel restrictions to mandatory vaccinations, and on and on and on the list goes. To this day, I am sure occasionally you will see someone driving around alone in their car wearing a mask. The fact of the matter is that we are heading into difficult times, challenging times, when a great many of our conditioned beliefs and ways of life and expectations in terms of comfort and security, many of these conditioned habits and beliefs that we have about what life is and what it should be are going to be challenged in a serious way. Many of the outcomes of various circumstances that are unfolding as we speak and have yet to unfold, many of the outcomes will, shall we say, not conform to either our expectations or indeed our desired outcomes, let alone our hopes and dreams. And because that is the case, we can all expect to be challenged in a significant way by our own fear. One of the reasons why I devoted today's live stream to this topic is because I have been given a new assignment. As you know, if you have been around and participated as an audience member of these live streams in the past, you know that when it is appropriate and opportune, I share with you my own process, my own, not just spiritual journey, but my life's work and how it's unfolding. And I do that because if there's any value whatsoever that you can extract from my experience, I hope that you are able to do so. That perhaps having access to what I experience may provide some insight into signs or symbols or callings that perhaps are trying to get through to you and trying to encourage you and inspire you to go in a different direction or a new direction or take up a new challenge, to undertake some new divinely inspired enterprise. Now, everyone's process is a little different, but what is universally true about divinely inspired assignments, whatever they may be, is that they come from within. That doesn't mean that the signs and the symbols around you and outside of you won't reflect that. You could receive signs and symbols, inspiration and encouragement from people and events in your life because they will be a reflection of your internal world. Your divine mother will take steps to orchestrate people, for instance, who come and start asking you about this or that or the other thing. They might come and say, "What are you working on right now?" Or, "Have you thought about this?" Or, "Have you thought about that?" And maybe you had thought about it, maybe you haven't, or maybe it's been something that you've been procrastinating on, or who knows what the case may be. But when enough serendipitous circumstances, signs, symbols, and events outside of you seem to be pointing in a certain direction, And then on top of that, you receive some form of internal guidance. Perhaps it's as simple as an intuition. Perhaps it's something more elaborate or more definitive. But when you take in the totality, the comprehensive nature of such synchronicity in your life, as above, so below, as within, so without, the hunches that you may be getting, or the thing that you may have been obsessing over in your mind, or the thing you may have been dreaming about, or who knows, but whatever's been going on internally in your psychology, all of a sudden, serendipitously, as though the whole universe is aligned in synchronicity to the internal workings of your own soul, begins to reflect that or echo that or nudge you in a certain direction toward that or away from that, whatever the case may be. But in the comprehensive consideration, the conscious meditation upon all of the synchronistic, serendipitous goings on in your life, emerges that fully baked cake, if you will, that is, at least for the time being, for the foreseeable future, your destiny. Your fated, divinely inspired enterprise, your new project, the new direction that you are being called to take in your life. Since last Sunday, I experienced just such a series of inner guidance and very, very mild external hints. But for me, because this is obviously not my first rodeo, the main driver, or the main reason why I know it has been assigned to me to begin work on my next book, whose topic will be about fear, is because I was essentially given a wake-up call. I mean, quite literally, a wake-up call. I was awoken at 3 a.m., which is not unusual for me. I mean, I awake during the witching hour on a regular basis. And when I awake at that time, I know that it's because I'm meant to meditate and to take advantage of that period in the morning, in the early morning before sunrise, when the veil between this reality and the internal worlds is the thinnest. And it is the best time to do meditation and pranayama and practice white tantra if you have the ability to do so with your spouse, because you are so much closer to your higher self. There are no distractions. There's nothing else to take you away from quiet time with yourself. Quality, quiet time spent with your innermost immortal beloved, your divine father and your divine mother. So, of course, I naturally began meditating and performing. I always begin my meditations doing pranayama. And it became very clear to me that the exact same circumstances were playing themselves out that I experienced every single day for, what was it, the 4 months, 5 months, 6 months that I spent writing my last book. That is, I was awoken during the witching hour and I would begin meditating, and not more than 15, 20 minutes into that meditation, or even if it was an hour, I wasn't able to fall back asleep. I wasn't allowed to get the rest of my hours of sleep in. No, I had to get up and go to the computer and preserve that semi-sleepy meditative state and harness that and take advantage of that precious time to essentially take dictation. And that was the process by which my last book was written. Right? I mean, it was I didn't write it in as much as it was written through me. And it was just serendipitous that I was awoken one morning last week, and that on the Thursday, someone had come over to visit, and he just turned to me and said, "So, are you writing a new book? Are you working on a new book?" And I had seen this individual the prior Saturday, and he never asked me about what was I working on, or was I working on a new book. It was just Thursday afternoon, he asked me, "So, are you working on a new book?" And it just so happens, yes, I am. It was, and between these two events and the fact that I've been waking up at 3 or 4 in the morning ever since, so as a result, I've been going to bed at 9 in order to accommodate and give me an opportunity to have more sleep, so I'm not running on 5 hours of sleep. And I had known right around the time I was publishing the last book that this was going to be the topic and the title of my next book. So much that I actually included that section on my website. I have a section called books, and I have a section here for what in hell is with us, right? The Great Awakening, and I have the description from the back of the book, and I have some testimonials, etc. But then I have coming next. F fear. Face the faces of face fear, faces of fear, and freedom from fear. And this little slideshow that's going here these are slides that I prepared a while back because I actually wrote a blog article about fear. How many years ago now? I wonder if it preserved the original date, or if it only has the date when I migrated over from my other blog host. Yeah, December 6, 2019. Well, it might have been the original date. So it was a blog article called Face Your Fears, Many Faces. And that blog article in some ways forms the backbone or the outline, the skeleton of what this book is going to be. But the book is going to be far more fleshed out, not least because, I wrote that blog 6 years ago. And in between writing that blog and today, obviously, one of the events that unfolded was the whole COVID phenomenon. And now we have a war that looks like it may precipitate a larger conflict. It appears that is in the cards. And, I talked about this last week, so I'm not going to necessarily tread that ground over again. And those of you who have spent time here before and know me, or if you've read my previous book, you know that I have an intimate knowledge of this phenomenon, this particular ego. I have spoken extensively about it, and clearly I have written about it already on my blog, and I've devoted live streams to the topic. But the time has come to synthesize all of my experiential knowledge about this particular demon into a format, first documenting it in book form, and then producing videos that spell out some of the more poignant aspects and elements of it. Because the world needs to understand. And the New Age platitudes about transforming fear into love, and that's all we need to do, these simple, oversimplified, kindergarten level proclamations are not going to cut it. They simply do not work. You cannot simply say to someone, "Oh, transform your fear into love and you'll be fine." We spent together on this program 3 weeks, each episode over 3 hours in length, talking about transformation of impressions, or transformation of perception, and the transmutation of deception, and the transmutation of energy, of desire. It was over 9 hours over 3 programs spread out over, well, it was 4 weeks because there was a break in between. But the point is, right, you cannot simply say, I'm going to transform my fear into love and then I'm going to be fine. That's not how that works. There's a metaphysical science to the metamorphosis that must be undertaken. And that work must be undertaken. But no one can undertake that work if they don't know they need to do it and they don't know how to do it. And what's worse is many of the causes of people's suffering, many don't even realize that it's fear, that it's fear-based. Even conditions that are self-evident, like anxiety and social anxiety, many don't realize, it doesn't click with them that that's actually fear, that it is chronic subconscious fear. Same with depression. Many who suffer from depression, myself included, the root cause of that depression is fear. And one of the main misconceptions or hidden truths that certainly the mainstream, the normies, the vast majority of individuals under the bell curve, let's say the average person in the world, does not understand and probably cannot begin to grasp at their current level, is that fear is behind the desire for comfort and security. And when you think about comfort and security, it's everywhere. The desire for comfort and security is so prevalent, is so accepted by everyone as a good thing, as a norm, as that's the way it should be. We should have comfort and security. That's a somehow a God-given right, an expectation, and an entitlement that certainly individuals in the West expect. That they be comfortable and that they be secure and that they have a level of security and that their children be safe all the time, safe from any possible harm. It was last week during my morning walk that I passed by the children waiting for the bus. And these were 10-year-olds, 11-year-olds. And they were wearing high visibility vests. You know, like the kind of vests that construction workers and emergency workers wear on the side of the road and on the side of the highway. Those neon colored high visibility vests. And some of them had their parents there waiting with them, waiting for the school bus. And I know that there are 2 generations, the millennials and Gen Z, who grew up under those circumstances. under a constant cloud of fear that necessitated, in their parents' eyes and in the professional opinion of pediatricians and child psychologists and so forth, that they were raised in a bubble of comfort and security. They were raised in a cage of constant observation and pandering and protection. They grew up in a bubble. And now, as adults, they're discovering that they are completely ill-equipped to cope with the world. And they are horrendously and tragically handicapped given what's on its way, given the dramatic transformations that are going to be taking place. And the next generation after Gen Z is going to be even worse off. What do they call them? They're called Gen Zero now, I believe. No, sorry, Gen Alpha. They're called Gen Alpha now. That's the next generation. And it just seems to be getting worse and worse. So it's time for an intervention. And, you know, will this book of mine make any difference? Will my efforts make any difference? Or will they just fall on deaf ears? I don't know. It's not my place to know that. And there's nothing I can do about it, frankly. That's an outcome that I have no control over. Nor should I want to control it. My job is simply to do what must be done. I must simply fulfill my role in the divine plan and serve my innermost intimate Christ, who in turn serves Allux, who is the Christ. And so the mere mortal that you see speaking to you now, I have to fulfill, I have to act on the intuition that I had way back when I published my last book. And when the intuition, the inspiration that I followed when I wrote the blog 6 years ago. And when I published the book 2 years ago and said, you know what? Something tells me that fear is going to be, is the next topic. And because it's just coming after COVID, but there's a time for everything, right? COVID was already over by the time I published my book. But now, and there was really nothing I could have said or done to alter any official policy related to the pandemic. But now, because there has been so much time since the pandemic, and because so many truths and lies, misinformation, disinformation, and outright propaganda and manipulation has come to light, and that it's no longer a fringe belief or a conspiracy theory, that many of the actions taken by the authorities and by governments and by the media during the pandemic, it has come to light and it is now mainstream knowledge, although not touted, not repeated often enough, that many aspects of COVID was not the truth about COVID was not as it was sold to us, the people. And that many of the draconian actions related to that whole episode were unjustified. But they were taken upon premises which were falsified. And that many of the actions and impositions that were taken and imposed upon us and encouraged that we adopt the real smoking gun, the real conspirator in all of this was fear. It was fear, and fear alone which allowed everything that unfolded during COVID, which didn't pass the smell test. Everything wrong about the way the world reacted to COVID was because of fear. Fear was the conspirator. That's what COVID was about. There was no deadly pandemic. Whatever COVID was or wasn't, I'm not going to get into that debate. But the statistics prove out that it was not anywhere near as deadly as it was made out to be. It was no more dangerous than any other annual flu. And so what COVID really was a referendum, a global referendum on fear. And humanity failed. In terms of the majority and what the majority did, and you look at how many people have 3, 4, 5, 6 boosters of an experimental vaccine using experimental technology, RNA altering, who knows what, and spike proteins and all sorts of information about what was going into that particular medical intervention. This humanity failed. This humanity failed that test. Azazel says hello. Hello, Azazel. Nice to have you with us. So, for the next little while, I'm going to be focusing on what I described in the blog that I first wrote about fear all those years ago now, that fear is the great chameleon. I could maybe show you what I mean by this. Here's the background image that I chose for the book. You see all those masks, all those demonic masks in the background there. Actually, that probably would have made a really good background for for today's live stream. But perhaps I'll save it for another day if I talk more about the actual different faces of fear. Because fear fears. Surprise, surprise. Spoiler alert. Fear is afraid. Now, I don't know how many egos you have meditated on. And I don't know how many comprehensions of those egos you have achieved. But in my case, as you know, with the epilepsy and everything, I talk about the demon, and the demon's primary characteristic is fear. Right? I live possessed by this particular entity. That's why I have the experience, and I know it so intimately. I live with it in a way that most people will never comprehend or never have to experience or endure. Because while everybody has fears, and yes, there are people who live with paranoia, and there are people who have panic attacks, and I'm not trying to make light or belittle anyone else's suffering. But the percentage of the population that suffer complete and total, not just paralysis, but complete and total possession by fear in the form of epileptic seizures and the related conditions on the autism spectrum that come from such a possession. The number of people who experience that and comprehend what it is that they're living with is very small. Most people who suffer from epilepsy will never face the reality that they're suffering from possession, right? Because of secular materialist science and medicine. I mean, and that's a no-no. You can't go there. It's going to be a very, very touchy subject, in the book, because it's a topic which, I mean, let's face it, it can get you completely ridiculed and by the establishment. But authorities and establishments are being rocked to their core as we speak. The very Kali Yuga, the end times, are all about the undermining of authority, of civilizational institutions. And as more and more of the truth is revealed and more people are at least awakening to certain truths, and they're awakening to the facts that the emperor has no clothes, the wholesale trust in established institutions and established authority figures is crumbling. And we see this, for instance, in the world of history, where individuals like Graham Hancock, though he wrote Fingerprints of the Gods, what was it, 30 years ago? Something like that, 30, 35 years ago, maybe more. It's taken him an entire lifetime. And finally, he gets his Netflix series. And finally, what he was writing about 35 years ago is beginning to go mainstream, where more and more people are coming forth with more and more evidence that the accepted canonical account for ancient history and the emergence of our global civilization is not only incomplete, but it is openly ignoring what is becoming a growing mountain of evidence. And that evidence that is being ignored, that's being, I don't know if you want to go so far as saying suppressed, but in the medical field, in the pharmaceutical field, in fields of engineering, in physics, in chemistry, right across the board, it is becoming apparent that many advances and technologies were, let's be charitable and polite. If they weren't suppressed necessarily, again, being charitable and polite, we could say they were at the very least shelved prematurely. And serendipitously, just prior to beginning today's live stream, I was watching this cold fusion video. It's an excellent channel, by the way, about many practical real world topics, including advances in science and technology, but also their socioeconomic impact. And yeah, that's hang on a second. This is probably as good as any. This particular video was about thorium and the fact that supposedly the Chinese claim to have created a thorium reactor, thorium saltwater reactor, and that they did so using research that was developed by the Americans back in the 50s. And this video outlines in fair detail what the story is and what the controversy is regarding this particular technology, and why it was shelved, why the Americans shelved thorium. And I might as well share the link with you so that you can watch it on your own time. It's only, 25 minutes, maybe? It's 23 minutes, 23 and a half minutes. But there it is. The link's in the chat, but it's here on screen as well. But you can also just go to YouTube and search for, what's the title here? How China won the thorium nuclear energy race. If I make that bigger, I'll make it bigger here. Right? So just search YouTube for how China won the thorium nuclear energy race. And the channel again is Cold Fusion. So the short version was that here, I'll throw this up. Thorium, maybe that's, you know what, you can watch the video on your own time. I'm not going to worry about getting too into the weeds here. The bottom line is, or the short version is, that thorium cannot be weaponized. Oh, that's strange. I wonder, is this live stream not going on is it not working on Facebook right now? Because I got an error. Let's try this again. Anyway, let me know in the comments if you're watching on YouTube and or Facebook, if it's working, because I'm getting an error that it's possible that this is not working on Facebook right now. There's nothing I can do about it, frankly, but yeah, okay. Because I noticed the number is low today. The number of people viewing is low, but I see a like. Somebody put a like, so it apparently Karate Ute is watching on Facebook. Anyway, doesn't matter. Maybe I just got a weird error. So this thorium technology is supposedly 200 times more efficient than uranium, but it cannot be weaponized. In other words, you can't make a bomb out of thorium. You cannot make nuclear weapons out of thorium. But thorium is far more efficient, far more power dense, far safer, and far cleaner than uranium or plutonium reactors, than heavy water reactors, or the dry plutonium reactors. But it was shelved because you couldn't make weapons out of it, because we were in the Cold War, and the hawks in the United States wanted a technology that they could weaponize. Andrea says it's working on Facebook. Okay, thanks, Andrea. I appreciate that. So they shelved it. A technology that, when you compare it, the same amount of uranium that could power a city for a day, if I'm getting these numbers right, that the same amount of thorium could power that city for 6 months. That's how much more power dense and power efficient it is. Just think about that for a second. Like, if you had a handful of uranium, and you could power your city for a day with a handful of uranium, that same handful of thorium could power your city for 6 months. That's incredible. That's a phenomenal discrepancy. And whereas the spent uranium or the spent plutonium from the reactor, the used up fuel, is going to remain dangerous for thousands of years, right? It has a half-life of that time. The thorium remains radioactive for hundreds of years, not thousands of years, which means it's far safer, it's far less dangerous. It's also the nature of the reactor is safer, because you only need salt water to facilitate the reaction. And if the temperature of the water gets too high, the seal on the reactor, you put a wax seal on the reactor so that if the temperature gets too high, the seal melts and gravity drains all the water out of the reactor, and now you stop the reaction. And you're able to do this because a saline thorium reactor, the water is not under pressure. It's not a high pressure reactor, and the reactor is not the water there. So in other words, there's veritably no risk of an explosion or a rupture that's going to release all kinds of high pressure steam radioactive steam into the atmosphere. And this far superior, far safer energy technology was shelved by the powers that be, by the authorities at the time. Why? Because it couldn't be weaponized. Because you couldn't use a thorium reactor to enrich uranium and turn it into plutonium for atomic weapons. And that's why it was shelved. But it wasn't suppressed. It was just shelved and ignored and forgotten about until a physicist at NASA who was looking at the renewed interest in Mars travel and the moon, establishing a base on the moon. He found this old research, and very quickly he became very excited at the prospect of thorium reactors on the moon, because number one is, with a very small amount of fuel, you could power a moon base for years. And it just so happens that the moon is very rich in thorium. So it's like, it was a no-brainer. It was like it seemed to him to be a perfect avenue to explore. And because of the duration of time which had passed, the Freedom of Information Act had been passed, he was able to publicly disclose the information and put the research online, make it available, openly available. The Chinese government saw that research and took it, and apparently, supposedly, have used it to now build the world's first working thorium reactor somewhere in China. And if this proves out to be successful, that they've actually pulled this off, then China, with that single act, using technology, using research originally developed by the Americans, will have just leapfrogged America and the West by decades in terms of their ability to produce power cheaply and ineffectively. You know why? Because thorium happens to be a natural byproduct of the mining of rare earth metals. Where you find rare earth metals, you find thorium. So all of the cobalt and all of the other magnesium and all the other rare earth metals that the world has been ravenously mining over the last few decades for cell phones and for technology of all kinds, they have been accumulating massive amounts of thorium as a byproduct. So if China, over the next decade, were to build, I don't know how many thorium reactors, they don't even have to mine thorium for the next 20 years. They have at least a 20-year supply of thorium just laying around. So you see the established authorities, the established centers of power, and the ones who have controlled for the better part of, well, you could easily say 100 years, they're being undermined. Their time is coming to an end. And as these shifts, these tectonic shifts take place, many who have had control are about to lose control. Their power structures are being undermined. They're on shaky ground. And many who had relatively little control over their lives are on the verge of gaining access to new sources of empowerment, meaning they're going to be able to, at very least, take control back over their lives and over their destinies. And to the degree individuals are motivated by that, the desire for control, the desire for power, but the desire for control and the desire to control outcomes, that's an indication of how those individuals are possessed by fear. Because it is fear that impels us and compels us to seek dominance and control over our own lives and over the lives of others. So, practically speaking, as time unfolds over the next few months, few years, and possibly decades, and power shifts, and people who had control, people who were dominant, become less dominant. They begin to lose control. The demons that possess them are going to have a breakdown. They're going to freak out. And that mass panic is going to be fear. And the scramble to regain power or to regain dominance or to retool and some of that panic, some of that desperation is going to manifest as what we are witnessing right now in the Middle East, which is, as we talked about last week, which is being sold to us by the Israeli government as a preemptive strike in the name of security, in the name of self-defense. And I explained last week how that is nonsensical. It's a nonsensical non-starter. I'm going to bomb the crap out of your country because I'm afraid you might get a nuclear weapon. How is that not fear? Now, I mentioned that fear is the great chameleon. Fear wears many masks. Fear has many faces. And that whole long spiel was the first major, most common face of fear that people do not recognize as fear. That is the desire to control and the desire for comfort and security. Because if you ask general population, 90 some odd percent of people will tell you that being in control of your destiny is good and that living with comfort and security is good. And that seeking comfort and security and making that a priority in your life is a good thing. Both of those are faces of fear. Again, that society has embraced. That's a good thing. Control. And the president of the United States is on X, formerly known as Twitter, expressing that American dominance in the world is a good thing, and we must assert our continued dominance in the world, and we must assert our dominance over the Middle East and over the Muslim nations. We must put them in their place, and Israel is doing just that. And now they've joined in the bombing campaign, according to reports and according to Trump. So we actually have the leader of the free world, so-called, telling the world that dominance is good, that being in control is good. One of the many faces of fear this book is going to provide an opportunity for me to spell out metaphysically, scientifically, psychologically, the evidence. It's going to allow me to make the case, but using experiential knowledge to allow the readers and psychologists and as many as I can convince to read the case, for them to be able to seek the truth of it for themselves. And of course, one of the avenues by which I will do that is via fear's consort. And when I've talked about this in the past, that esoterically and in ancient times, fear was characterized as Asmodeus, the demon Asmodeus. Now, the demon Asmodeus had as his consort Lilith, who was considered one of the highest demons in the hierarchy. And Lilith is the demon of lust. And I've explained in the past how fear and lust are intimately connected. And that connection and the connection between fear and lust is relatable on multiple levels. There's multiple different aspects, not least of which, when we talk about fear having as one of its primary concerns controlling outcomes, and when you consider lust and what lust's focus is, quite literally, what lust wants to accomplish, what lust wants to achieve in the act, in the sexual act, that is directly parallel to fear's desire to control outcomes. The two are linked, they're married. Now, when you begin to embellish that and begin to move into some of the more degenerate expressions of sexuality, you eventually step into the world of domination and submission. And domination and submission is inherently an entire subgroup of sexual fetishizing, if I have that right. It's not easy to say, fetishizing. It's a fetish. Domination and submission. But it's linked to sexuality. Again, for the people practicing domination and submission, and they're just treating it as a harmless fetish, right? It's just part of their sexuality. It's just part of their role playing. It's just fun. It's just playing games. But they, quote, get off on it. That means something is getting off on it. Again, it's a face of fear that goes unnoticed, unrecognized for what it really is. Really, in many ways, a part of this book, and maybe the entire first part of the book, facing fear, we have to face the facts of recent history. Going all the way back to the Cold War and the communist boogeyman. But more recently, we can go back to 2001, September 11th. And perhaps just for the sake of younger generations whom really somehow have to be impressed upon the importance of reading this book, maybe the best strategy is to avoid Cold War and all that stuff, because guess what? Generation X, we didn't buy into that fear while we were in the middle of it. And many of us didn't buy into the post 9/11 narrative either. But the millennials and Gen Z, right? The millennials certainly, and so many others, and the boomers bought into the whole war on terror and all of the loss of civil liberties, the violations of civil liberties, and everything that took place in the post 9/11 world. Again, it was all based on fear, and it was a psyop that was all built around fear, right? Because you have to fear the new boogeyman, which was not the Soviet Union and communism, but now the new boogeyman was these terrorists living in caves, and you didn't know when they were going to strike next. So you had to take extraordinary steps to surveil the population. You had to tighten your control, tighten your grip over everything in order to keep everybody safe and secure from these terrorists. So really, it's very poetic, actually, that in 2025 I will be able to publish and thus go public with the proclamation that the 21st century, that the first quarter of the 21st century has been marked by fear. That so far, you look at the major global events that have taken place, political, socioeconomic, health, and military events, the first 25 years of the 21st century have been defined by fear and fear alone. Prove me otherwise. Show me the evidence that I am wrong, because I will be dedicating the first part of my book to proving this to be so, that the 21st century is the century of fear. That courage was not to be found either in the millennials or in Gen Z. And that, frankly, my personal feeling is that Gen X is just waiting for the boomers to finally throw up their heels and die off so we can take the reins and start steering things back in the right direction. But really, it's not just the boomers that need to die off. It's their fear-based, control dominance-based institutions that need to be undermined and need to crumble. And then we have a chance of reorienting the world. We cannot leave it to the millennials and Gen Z to do it, because they're ruled by fear. But we were the free range generation. We were the ones who were spent all day by ourselves, going off and exploring the world, and we had no fear. Even individuals like myself, who was possessed by fear. It's like I was taking every opportunity to face my fear and conquer my fear and overcome whatever it is I might have been afraid of. And we were given the space. That's why we're called the free range generation. And we were given the space to do so. I mean, we're the last generation of kids who showed up at school on crutches. It just doesn't happen anymore. You don't see kids with broken limbs going to school anymore, because it doesn't happen. They don't, everything is too safe for them now. Whereas many of you of that generation know that, it was a thing where, someone broke their leg on, BMX on their BMX bike, or doing whatever, skiing or whatever it was they were doing. And now everybody got to sign their cast, right? They showed up in school in a cast, and that was the thing. Everybody signed their name on their cast. That's just not a thing anymore. Yeah, the 21st century. And what a century of fear, a quarter century of fear anyway. But what a bad omen, what a terrible omen that the new millennium and the first 25 years of the new millennium have been marred by fear. And I don't think that, right, any of these conflicts are going to be inspiring great acts of courage anytime soon. Because right now, at least, all they're talking about is high-tech weaponry and hypersonic missiles and remote drone strikes and so on and so forth. And if it comes to having to recruit soldiers for boots on the ground, I don't know many millennials or Gen Z who are even qualified to be able to uh, volunteer, let alone capable of enduring something as psychologically and physically demanding and stressful as a war. Millennials and Gen Z can barely handle life as it is, like normal life, with all of their comfort and security and entitlements. They're not going off to war anytime soon. And if they are, they're not coming back. Or if they're coming back, maybe not in a wooden box, they're coming back in a straitjacket. Because they're not psychologically equipped. They're like the weakest generation. And what makes them weak is that they were raised, right? And the past 25 years have been defined by fear. And we've been saturated, we've been overwhelmed by it. And we have embraced it in many ways through the control and dominance and desire for comfort and security. We've embraced and indulged fear. And fear has only gotten stronger. Fear has only entrenched itself in people. And things like COVID only let fear dig itself in even more, right? It's like but somebody has to bring this to light. Somebody has to make it clear to the normies, to the world, that this is so, and that fear is not a good thing. Someone has to dispel the myth that is propagated over and over and over again, how fear is your friend, fear keeps you safe. You need fear. You need fear because how else are you going to know when you're in danger? Well, I'll tell you how you know. It's called being awake. It's called paying attention. It's called being conscious. When fear tells you you're in danger, you're not conscious. You're unconscious. Fear doesn't make you more conscious. Fear hypnotizes you. Fear possesses you. Fear wants you in its grips. You're not conscious when fear has you. You're unconscious. You're fearful. You're full of fear. And fear is going to be afraid. And when you're afraid, you don't think clearly. You don't see clearly. And you don't act with clarity. You act reactively, impulsively, and often you do the wrong thing. You panic and you make mistakes. Like if you're on the highway and it's late at night and it's a light rain, but it's about 0 degrees, and all of a sudden your car just starts doing this on the highway. Why? Because you hit a patch of black ice. And you lose complete control of the car. What do? Do you panic? and slam on the brakes or start, like if you panic, you're going to hit the wall, you're going to hit the guardrail, or you're going to hit another car. You have a chance to recover, but only if you remain aware and conscious and recognize, okay, I'm on black ice and I'm losing control. So right away, the first thing is I want to take my foot off the gas. If I'm driving standard, I want to put it into a lower gear. And if I don't want to slam on the brakes. That's the last thing I want to do. Even if I have anti-lock brakes, I don't want to do that. I'm going to try to remain calm and aware, and I'm going to try to put the steering in the direction that I want the car to go, even as I'm slowing down. But I don't want to jerk the wheel, and there's a lot of things I don't want to do. In other words, I don't want to panic, and I don't want to make the instinctive moves that you make when you're in a panic mode in a car, like slamming on the brakes and yanking the wheel in the other direction, because that's just going to make you spin out even more. Believe me, I know, because I know from experience, because I smashed a car on the Don Valley Parkway after I hit a patch of black ice. And I know what happens when you panic in that circumstance. I know what it means to be gripped by fear in that circumstance. And it's not your friend. Fear in that situation is not your friend. Neither is fear your friend when you're at home at night and your spouse is out with the girls or out with the boys and they haven't checked in, they haven't called you, or they haven't sent you a text message, and they're later than what you were expecting. And now you're sitting there and you're worried. You're worried about what they're doing out there on their girls' night or their guys' night. And you're sitting there alone, worrying about what's happened. Is he okay? Is he safe? Did he get in an accident? Is he drunk? Is he cheating on me? Or whatever the case may be. Where do those thoughts come from? Are they rational? Do they help? Or is fear tormenting you? And down the line, any possible scenario you can think of where fear is your friend, it can be debunked in less than a minute, because I can show you the proof. I can show you I can demonstrate the opposite of being conscious instead. Like stepping into a strange place you've never been before, or going onto a construction site or a demolition site. There's no point in being afraid that this wall might collapse on you, or the floor might collapse, or anything I touch might collapse or break as I'm walking around. No, you just need to be aware. Keep your wits about you. Be conscious. And listen to your intuition. You know what? Don't step on that. Don't lean on this wall. Don't put any pressure here, right? But there's no point in walking around being afraid of everything. And yeah, there's going to be times that you're afraid, and you're just going to have to face it and deal with it. Just don't indulge it. Don't run with it. Don't allow yourself to be roped in by its grift. And when I say you're going to be afraid, countless faces of fear. You talk about phobias, right? Worries, anxieties. Again, the danger aspect, the comfort and security aspect. And then there's panic attacks, paranoia, And let's not even mention the irrational fears, like phobias. So people can become afraid of anything. You can be claustrophobic, afraid of tight spaces, or you can be afraid of wide open spaces, which I believe the term is agoraphobia, the fear of wide open spaces. You can be afraid of people, right? Social anxiety, or you can be afraid of specific people. And I'm also going to have to address this whole issue around trauma. Traumatic events that have resulted in trauma, people call trauma responses. Someone is traumatized, and therefore, that's like an example of that is a child who was bitten by a dog when they were small, and now they're terrified of dogs. Well, the fact of the matter is that the child had fear. The traumatic event, being bitten by a dog, simply gives the fear inside that child an excuse, a target, a trigger through which fear can possess them quite easily, by which the fear can grip them and dominate over them. The dog is the excuse. The dog is not the cause of fear. So when psychologists and psychiatrists try to treat phobias through exposure therapy, and they think they're curing fear by exposing the individual to the phobia, they're using conditioning to weaken fear's hold over the individual via that particular trigger. But in no way, shape, or form whatsoever are they eliminating fear from the individual. Fear as an entity will simply morph, simply take off the dog trauma mask and put on a different mask. So sure, it's fine. You might help the person that they can now have a dog as a pet. And maybe that's beneficial for them. Certainly here in the West, or just about anywhere you go in the world, dogs are a part of life, part of humanity. Dog is man's best friend, right? So they're everywhere. So being traumatized, being terrified of dogs is not a practical, not a very, it's quite the handicap, as a matter of fact. So, facing that fear and overcoming that trauma has its benefits. But don't think for a minute, just because, you used to be terrified of something and now you're no longer terrified of that thing, don't think that you're now free of fear. It's just simply that trigger doesn't trigger your fear anymore. It's quite possible that your fear, the demon of fear inside, simply got bored of that particular trigger, moved someplace else, moved into control, moved into dominance, moved into domination, moved into the desire for comfort and security. Just put on a different face. This is what psychologists don't understand. They don't realize how versatile, how subtle, and how clever and how malleable egos are, because they don't know their nature. They don't even recognize the multiplicity of egos inside of us. they cannot approach the truth because their materialist intellectual frame is so conditioned and biased, and it is so trapped in a certain way of thinking about psychology that they cannot see the forest for the trees. And this is particularly true for fear, again, because of its many faces and because it can change these masks at will. At will. And just as that's true metaphysically, it's also true physically. So someone who is put on anxiety medication, for instance, and they take medication to treat their anxiety, and sure, okay, they don't suffer from chronic anxiety anymore because they're medicated. So what happens? You think the demon, you think fear is going to be stopped by that? The fear that was happy to hang out in the subconscious of that individual, tormenting them, right? Doing what fear does, which is be afraid. That's what drains us from within, and that's what bubbles up from within. So on the surface, what we feel is this nagging, lingering anxiety about everything. But that's because in the subconscious, fear is just there, fearing, radiating that up to the surface. So if all of a sudden we get put on anxiety medication, and what the fear in the subconscious is radiating outwards is no longer effectual, is no longer effective, and no longer produces the desired effect that fear wants to produce. Remember, desired outcome, right? That's the nature of fear. That's what fear is. So if the medication now prevents the desired outcome that the fear in the subconscious wanted to achieve, you think it's going to sit there and just keep doing it and just keep observing and say, well, it's not having the desired effect. Well, they're on medication now. You think he's just going to roll over and go to sleep or throw his hands up and say, oh, well, I guess I'm done? No. He's going to go and find a different avenue through which to haunt you, through which to possess you, through which to grip you and get what it wants, which is your consciousness and your energy, your vitality, your sexual energy. It needs to feed. It needs to feed. It needs for you to be afraid. It needs to possess you in order for it to, quote, be from its point of view. In order for fear to be, to exist, and to be what it is, to do what it does, it needs you not to be. Right? It needs to be through you such that you aren't there. You're hypnotized. You're asleep. So if the medication blocks the anxiety, the fear is going to manifest in a different way. It could be through some other physical, it could be some physical twitch, or it could be metaphysical. It could be just psychological, which may account for why so many of the medications that they give to individuals for psychological symptoms, for psychological mental health problems, why those medications come with so many side effects. So there are many, there are epilepsy medications, for instance, that some of the side effects include emotional outbursts or heightened emotionality, bipolar symptoms, and even psychotic behavior. And I was put on one of those medications once, and my family reported that my behavior at times was, they got really worried, they got really afraid because of some of the ways I was behaving. So yeah, the medication was helping to control seizures to a degree, but the result was that the demon was manifesting. It was freaking out. It was angry. It started going psycho. Why? Because it wasn't able to possess me in the way that it wanted to. And when a demon doesn't get its way, like when a 2-year-old doesn't get its way, and when the demon's nature is all about getting its way, possessing you, gripping you, it's all about the desire for outcomes. And it can't get to that outcome anymore because something medically, physically is in the way. But that medical, physical intervention can't get at a demon. So the demon's going to say, "Oh yeah, you think you're gonna stop me with that? Well, I'll show you." And it goes into a different center of the brain or the body, and it starts doing its thing. And next thing you know, you're having psychotic episodes. You see, there is no logical explanation for why a substance that controls depression or anxiety should have, as part of its long list of possible side effects, psychosis, psychotic behavior. There's no substance that does that turns somebody into a psychopath. Alcohol does not turn you into a psychopath. What it does is it lowers your inhibition. It lowers your ability to assert willpower and self-control. Drink enough alcohol, get drunk enough, and you can pee your pants and poo your pants, right? Your physical body, you lose control over your physical body. And why it's so dangerous to drive under the influence, because you lose your motor skills, right? That's what alcohol does. When you lose your inhibitions, but you're losing your ability to maintain sovereignty over yourself. And of course, not just physically, but also emotionally and mentally, which is why you can't think clearly when you're drunk, and why so many guys and girls, for that matter, so many individuals, when they get drunk, all of a sudden all these emotions come out of them. I love you, man. I love you. Like guys who would never got, like the toughest, meanest, hard-nosed, stone cold, macho guys but then they get drunk with their mates, and next thing you know, they're slobbering and sobbing and crying their heart out to one another. I love you, man. I love you, man. Right? That's an old cliche. Right? So substances cannot impose a demon on you. Right? There's nothing in the substance that can do that. It's a substance. But what it can do is it can alter the physiology of the brain chemistry, and it can make metaphysical alterations as well that open new avenues that were otherwise closed. Like I say, alcohol lowering inhibitions, or in the case of many of these powerful mood altering and psychology altering drugs, close doors on a certain demon, but then that demon will go and seek to open another window. And if it provokes the demon, if it provokes the fear, then the fear can assert itself in potentially new and even more devastating ways, because you've poked the proverbial bear, or you've awoken the dragon, or pick a or you've denied, right? You've denied the demon its sustenance and its ability to be, its ability to do what it does. And from your own experience, when you want something and you want it really, really, really bad, and it's denied you, you know what that feels like. You know that it switches to anger, it switches to rage and frustration and patience, like sexual frustration. Like why chastity, or not chastity, abstinence in the Catholic Church led to all sorts of abuses: physical abuse, mental abuse, sexual abuse by both nuns and priests. Why? Because their lust was being suppressed, but forcefully was being forced and repressed, and that repressed sexual desire festered and festered and festered and festered, and the sexual energy, which was not being circulated because they don't teach nuns and priests pranayama, that sexual energy was building and building and building and building and becoming stagnant and putrid, and not, in other words, negative. And that energy was building and building and building, and just like a volcano, it eventually erupts. But the sexual desire that was being suppressed and repressed, but lust's consort, fear, was being indulged. Because you ask any Christian, any Catholic, how they were raised, what they were taught, how the Bible is taught to them. And at some point, if you ask them about, is it right to be an upright, God-fearing Christian or a God-fearing Catholic, many of them, and certainly many priests, will tell you, old school priests would answer, yes, that's right. We have to be God-fearing. And the trick that fear and lust will play is that as you as you commit yourself to abstinence, well, that takes a lot of self-control, right? That's a lot of controlling outcomes and controlling what you think, but it's a forceful controlling. And if you begin to fall into the trap of fearing your desire, of fearing lust, so you start building fear, you start using fear and fear's desire to control to suppress lust. But it's a grift, it's a scam. It's one of the faces of fear. And that building sexual energy, that building sexual frustration is there repressed in the subconscious, building and building and building. But here in your conscious mind, you're indulging and strengthening the consort of lust, fear. And fear is the desire to dominate and control. So if that demon of fear has convinced you and is using your willpower against you, by you dominating and controlling your lust and your desire and your thoughts, and you being afraid of your impure thoughts, and you going to confession to confess your impure thoughts because you're so afraid you're not going to be a good priest or a good nun. And it's fear. Now what happens? 5, 10, 15, 20 years, 25, 30 years of this, and you work your way up the ranks, and now you find yourself in a residential school as a nun teaching indigenous children, or you find yourself a Franciscan priest or a monk, or a priest with altar boys, and that fear that you have been indulging for decades and decades and decades, while its consort, lust, has been quietly biding its time, building its strength, building as a horde of negatively charged sexual energy and sexual frustration. And you have been indulging one of the faces of fear, the desire to dominate and control, and in this case, suppress. And now all of a sudden, you are given access to dozens and dozens of young, innocent boys, or in the case of the nun in the residential school, you're given access to dozens, if not hundreds, of young, innocent Aboriginal children. And that suppressed sexual tension, that sexual frustration, now, through a very strong, indulged, cultivated, and strengthened fear of ego of domination, of dominance. So now you have the stories of nuns in convents and in schools using corporal punishment, caning children, whipping them, belting them, hurling all manner of abuses just to assert their dominance through anger, through pent-up sexual frustration that comes out through domination and control of humiliation, of physical violence, And then on the other hand, you have pedophile priests. Because rape is violence. And sodomy is dominance. And pedophilia is absolutely fear, to control and dominate the weak and the innocent. In other words, to get them to submit, which is the same thing the nuns were doing in the schools. Women are differently wired than men, right? Women do not. The cases of women raping men are exponentially lower, because women, they seek domination and control and violence of others through more passive aggressive means. That's why the majority of passive aggressive toxicity, and like why the woke movement is dominated by women, because they seek to dominate in a passive aggressive way, whereas men tend to dominate in a more aggressive way. And so you have pedophile priests, and you have the absolute, horrible demonic nuns. Why? Because of fear. Because to be a God-fearing Catholic or a God-fearing Christian makes you good in the eyes of God, right? And what I'm sharing with you is borne out by the evidence. I will not stand for people to say, but that's anecdotal evidence. I will not stand for that when the anecdotes are counted in the hundreds and in the thousands. That's not anecdotal evidence anymore. That's called a trend. That's called evidence. And not only that, it is what it is. It's the truth. And so there are modern expressions of this online, not just the epidemic of pornography, but also the OnlyFans phenomenon. There are so many different case studies of how dominance and control are playing out in the digital world. And it's all based in fear. Although it's not certainly not exclusive to this millennia. It's been around for, oh gosh, it's been around for hundreds of years. Advertising. And this is an opportunity for the world to be enlightened as to one of the great lies or the great hidden truths. Because everybody knows that sex sells. And advertisers and everybody will tell you that sex sells and that sex appeal sells. And that certainly was absolutely true in the 80s, right? And that, they were putting bikini clad, women lying across the roof of an automobile or the hood of the car, right? And sex was being used to sell everything, you name it. Especially when you looked at even professional trade magazines for handymen and plumbers and carpenters and construction workers and, like Tractor Monthly for farmers would feature scantily clad women, right, draping themselves over the latest John Deere tractor, and that would be on the cover of Tractor Magazine, right? Tractor Monthly or whatever, or Farmers Monthly, because sex sells, right? Sex sells. Well, have you ever heard anybody say fear sells? You've never heard anybody say fear sells. But every advertising executive, every marketer anywhere in the world will tell you that the best practices of marketing is you have to create the demand. How do you create the demand? As a marketer of any product or service, the first thing you do, the first step, is to define the problem. You create the fear. You convince your market what's missing, what they don't have, what the problem that they're living with, and why it's a problem and why they should be afraid of that problem. It's all fear. Oh, get a VPN. Oh, you better get a VPN. Why? Oh, because everybody's spying on you. Your ISP and the government and the world is spying on you and what you're looking at online. Oh, get a VPN. You have to have a VPN. Oh, and what about the antivirus? Oh, and then there's anti-malware. And don't forget this and don't forget that. Why? Because the entire world is out to infect you and your computer alone. And the government is spying on you. Don't let them spy on you. Get a VPN. Get Norton antivirus. Get this. Get the password protectors and this and that and the other thing and all the stuff that you need. Why? Because you're in danger. You're in danger. Your privacy is insecure. Your privacy is at risk. Big Brother is watching you. Then you flip the channel, go on to YouTube and watch these health and wellness and fitness influencers, right? Right? The only 5 exercises you need, or this type of activity is killing your gains, or this type of food is making you fat, or this type of food is giving you cancer, or this ingredient is doing this or that. Oh, and by the way, here's my line of scientifically formulated supplements, or here's my personal line of scientifically formulated protein, or here's my personally guided, customized health and wellness program. Come to my seminar. This all started in the 80s, right? The late night TV ads, the self-help gurus. If you ever gone to one of those real estate seminars or self-help guru, the self-help guru comes out. What do? They start showing pictures of yachts. Who wants this yacht? Who would like a yacht like this? They put up a picture of a Ferrari. Who would like a Ferrari like this? Who would like? Put your hands up, right? Put your hands up. Everybody puts their hands up. Okay, then they put a huge mansion. Who wants to live in a mansion like this? Who wants to live in a mansion, right? And everybody puts their hands up. And then they put a cottage, a beautiful remote setting. Who wants to have a cottage like this? Put your hands up. Maybe you have a show of hands, right? And that act of getting your audience to put up their hand and give me a show of hands, when you are sitting in the audience, you might not even drive. You might hate sports cars and driving. You like your little Honda Civic hatchback, or whatever it is you drive, or maybe you don't drive at all, right? You like taking the bus and the train. You don't even want a car. But when he throws the Ferrari up on the screen and everybody around you going, ooh, and everybody around you is putting up their hand. Oh yeah, sure, I want a Ferrari. You're sitting there in that audience, and now you're the only one who's not putting up their hand. Now you're an outsider. Now you don't belong. Oh no. Oh, I better put my hand up too. I don't want to be left out. I don't want to be a Debbie Downer. I don't want to be the one left behind. No. I want to be a part of this. I want to be a part of this wealth making seminar, this self-help event or whatever. Right? You don't want to stand out as someone who's not part of on the same team or on the same page or whatever the case may be. In other words, you react with fear. And the fake guru on stage pitching you hasn't even pitched you anything yet. What is he doing? He's getting you to react and respond and indulge your fear. Afraid of being left out, afraid of not being one of them, afraid of being, and actually, we have a name for this, right? We have a name for this. And it's very common. You will see it referred to all the time. It's one of the most powerful selling tools and marketing tools in use today, especially online. But it's used in politics, it's used in religion, it's used in, like I said, in self-help, in seminars, webinars, in all kinds of sales and marketing and advertising. It's FOMO. Fear of missing out. Fear of missing out. If you can implant the seed of fear of missing out, you're exploiting the innate, primal, instinctive desire of the social animal of hominids, of the intellectual animal we call human beings. But we're social animals. We don't want to be left behind. We want to be a part of the tribe. We want to belong. We want to be one of the gang. We want to, and certainly, we don't want to be left behind. We don't want to be abandoned, and we don't want to miss out on a good thing, especially when we know we're surrounded by everybody and everybody's excited, enthusiastic, and what do they? And, you might be skeptical, but what do they know that I don't know? What am I missing out on? Oh, I better go along with it. I better sign up because I don't want to miss out on this opportunity, this once in a lifetime opportunity. Especially nowadays, when millennials and Gen Z are far less susceptible to sexualized advertising. That's why you see far less sexy ads anymore, because it's no longer politically correct, right? The woke culture, the objectification of women the younger generations have been so indoctrinated with this, and that they find sexiness, attractiveness, and they find it insulting, they find it offensive, because they're so sensitive. They can't handle it. And so instead, marketers, being the opportunists that they are, well, you fish where the fish are, and you use the right bait. In other words, you don't try to catch a shark with a carrot, right? You can't catch a shark with corn, or with an earthworm. But there's lots of fish that will bite on corn, and will certainly lots of fish that you can catch with an earthworm, but you can't catch a shark with an earthworm. So you need the right bait. So if the millennials and Gen Z aren't going to bite on the sexy ads, and the women aren't going to go for the sexy ads anymore, they're going to be offended by it, and blah, 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 and this and that, well, no problem. We'll just switch to FOMO. And this is a change, a shift that has occurred in my lifetime. So in the last 50 years, the first 25 years of my life, I have to say, I don't recall nearly as much FOMO as what's happening today. FOMO is everywhere. And it's because in the 80s and the 90s even, right, advertising was like, empowering, right? Like even the sexy ads or whatever, it was like advertisers were selling you a fantasy, and that fantasy was often around power and control and like sexual virility, right? So it's related to the masculine and the power and dominance and control. So you buy this car, and with the beautiful woman draped over it, it's like this car screams sexual virility and power and strength, and right, and that's why this beautiful, gorgeous, half naked woman is draped all over it. Do you want a beautiful, voluptuous, half naked woman to drape herself all over you and fawn all over you? Well, then you need to buy this V8 muscle car. That was the association. But you see, getting the beautiful woman to fawn all over you the way she's fawning all over the car, that's the connection. By why, if you had the car, she'd be fawning all over you. Well, fawning, to fawn, is what? It's a running theme. I'm going to bring the masks back. To fawn is another face of fear. What do we know? What are we hammered into about what fear is? Fear, the instinctive, primal instinct of fear, is what do we say? Fight or flight. That's what we're told. Fight or flight, right? In the typical binary, mechanical, yes or no, black or white, us or them, this or that, right? That's the mechanical tendency of the mechanical mind. Simple. Fight or flight, this or that, right? That's what we're told. And yet that's half of what fear is. Because in between fight or flight is what? Is freeze. To be paralyzed by fear. And this is a real phenomenon. You may have experienced it yourself, but if you've ever driven at night on a country road, a back road, or a highway or a mountain road, you know, it's an idiom. We have an idiom called deer in headlights. When that animal on the highway is frozen in fear. But you watch nature documentaries, or you watch, when you're walking and there's a rabbit, and that rabbit, it's doing its thing, then you're walking and walking, you get close enough, all of a sudden the rabbit is frozen. It's completely, right? And it won't move. It's frozen in fear. And if you keep pressing and keep pressing and keep pushing and pushing and closer and closer and closer, eventually it'll break out of that freeze and it'll go into flight. But for a brief moment in time, it was frozen in fear. Same with deer, same with lots of animals. And for many animals, this is part of their survival strategy. Because to freeze, it's like many predators, it's like the Tyrannosaurus Rex in Jurassic Park. Many predators, their visual acuity is based on motion. So if you freeze, if you don't move, maybe he won't see me if I don't move. I have good camouflage. Maybe he has shitty eyesight, right? Most animals have terrible eyesight, generally speaking, right? So if I freeze, maybe I'll remain safe. And if you've ever experienced being paralyzed by fear, and you're just frozen, you can't do anything, and you're literally being gripped by fear. So that's option 3. But the fourth option that nobody ever talks about in relation to fear is, of course, fawn. And what is fawn? Fawn is when you're so terrified, you're so afraid of the dominance and control and the strength of someone or something that you assume the best survival strategy you possibly can, which is to throw yourself at their feet. Because this is the Grima Wormtongue strategy. If you remember the Two Towers and the Lord of the Rings, Grima who fawns over Saruman. This is the strategy of every backstabbing, sniveling, weakling that fawns over the alpha. So in other words, there's the runt of the litter that fawns over the alpha for their own protection. It's LeFou in Beauty and the Beast, because Gaston is the most handsome and daring and rugged man in town. And so the town runt and weakling is always around Gaston. And it's the first song in Beauty of the Beast is LeFou singing the praises of Gaston. He's fawning over Gaston. And in modern woke Disney, the live action remake, the filmmakers went on record saying, oh, because we made LeFou gay, because he loves Gaston, because he's in love with Gaston. No. He's a sniveling, cowardly weakling and one of their best survival strategies when you're a runt A sniveling, cowardly weakling is to fawn over the strongest, biggest member of the pack you can, and thereby you can vicariously leech off of his dominance. That's what it means to fawn. Then there's the famous Stockholm syndrome, where the hostages of terrorists end up forming these relationships with the terrorists. That's a slightly different thing, but why would you as a hostage to a terrorist open up a dialogue of friendship and camaraderie and form a relationship, a loving relationship where you realize, oh, they're not so bad, right? If not a primal survival instinct. Because in a hostage situation, the kidnapper, the terrorist, has complete dominance and control over you. And if you can't get the upper hand through asserting your own desire to control and dominate the situation, and you can't flee, right? You can't fight. There's no flight. You're a hostage. And freeze is, well, there's not much point in that because you're already motion enemy. That is not an active option to freeze, right? You're already immobilized. So freezing doesn't do anything. You're not doing anything. And remember, egos want to do. They want to do what they are. So you can't fight, you can't flight, you can't freeze. What's left? You can fawn. Without having ever read any books or any research or any study about Stockholm Syndrome and the initial circumstance that first recorded historical event where we got the name Stockholm Syndrome, so the hostage taking in Stockholm, Sweden, I guarantee you it was the hostages who instigated the conversations with the terrorists. It was the hostages who began fawning over the terrorists. It was not the terrorist who reached out to the hostages to try to form a relationship with them. It was the other way around. It was the hostages who began fawning over their terrorists. There's no other explanation. You can't fight, you can't flight, you can't freeze. What's left? You fawn. And it makes perfect sense why you would use the fear of missing out, why you would drape a sexy bikini-clad model across the hood of a car. The car that has the engine, the horsepower, and the torque that men, generally speaking, are drawn to, the power and control and everything that comes with driving a big V8 muscle car or any sports car or a big pickup truck or whatever the case may be, or the John Deere tractor for that matter. Because the powerful engine and the dominating the road and dominating the drag race and dominating the drag strip and the street racing and so, but what else does the alpha want to dominate? Every alpha seeks to dominate the pack or the pride, first and foremost, to get mating rights, to dominate the reproductive process. And the same social hierarchical structure takes place among the females, where you have an alpha female who has first dibs on mating with the alpha male. And the females in the pack work itself out the same. So in other words, you have, which female can fawn best. And in the case of lionesses, that's why the alpha female also leads the hunt. Because the alpha male also eats first, and the dominant female leading the hunt determines the kill and brings home the kill that the alpha male eats first in the pride. So his favorite is the best hunter, the strongest hunter, the alpha female. And this is mechanically, evolutionarily speaking, it works this way because you have the strongest male mating the most often with the strongest, most clever, fastest female. So you are maximizing the best possible gene pool to control and dominate the outcome of having the strongest pride. You want the two alphas to mate as often as possible. So dominance and control and fawning, right? It's what the S&M crowd, the domination and submission sexually, is what they're getting tangled up in. A dominant and a submissive, they go hand in hand. But they're two sides of fear. And as I've explained before, lust, procreation, mechanically, lust controls and manages procreation, which is survival of the species. And fear, individually, is survival of the individual. So lust and fear are so intimately connected that lust and that this whole dominance and fawning hierarchical social order is intrinsically linked to procreation, which is control of outcomes and ensuring survival of the species. While fear ensures the survival of the individual. You see, all of this, when you just take half a moment to observe it, becomes self-evident. But it's not self-evident or if it is, it's not self-evident. If it is, it's just accepted by secular, modern, atheist, materialist, mechanical humanity as, well, we're all animals anyway, so it's all fine, it's all natural, it's all good. We're all animals. We're just animals. We're just intellectual animals. Andrea said, dangerous diseases can kill your child, but luckily we have vaccines. And Benjamin said, fawn to look into, or the abyss, saying when you stare into an abyss, the abyss stares back. Yeah, so you look into the abyss stares back. I'm not... And he says, and he follows that up and he says, the abyss stares back into you. I'm not exactly sure that idiom, that expression is used in that particular way, but it could be there. I see why you shared that, because yeah, if you look into the abyss, you're looking into the unknown, and people fear the unknown. And what you're saying is the unknown is staring back at you. And there's an expression that relates to this called tempting fate, where but that's where, yeah, you're staring into the abyss of the unknown, and it's like you're goading the unknown into something that you believe because that everything's going to work out. And so that's that expression, tempting fate, where you believe that you are fated to a certain outcome. And so it's like you tempt fate by taking outlandish risks or actions which potentially jeopardize that. So yeah, we can go down lots of rabbit holes here, because there's probably hundreds of idioms and expressions that we have that are at their core, their esoteric root is fear and control, right? To be in control of your own light and to dominate your own destiny, right? To be in control of your own destiny. That's to tempt fate. Because the whole notion of fate is that you're not in control of your destiny. So to tempt fate by trying to take control of your destiny is tempting fate to take that control back from you. It's suffice it to say, I was speaking to a friend of mine, and I at one point suggested to him that, oh, this book really needs to be like, it really needs to be like thin and light and like really approachable and almost like a handbook. But the more time I spend, like I was writing the preface and the introduction, and as I was going over and reviewing, how prevalent fear is and how dominant it is. It's like humanity needs an expose. It needs an apocalypse of fear. It needs a revelation of fear. And we've been talking about it now, right, today, for 2.5 hours alone. And there's still so much more to say. We haven't even begun to scratch the surface of the topic. And you obviously can get a sense of how wide-reaching the breadth and scope of fear's influence on humanity, and how so much of what we take for granted or what we just assume, is for this reason or that reason, you start peeling back the layers, and eventually you come back to, holy shit, there it is again. But it's never the same, right? It's always wearing a different mask. Fear is in a different guise. That's why I say fear is the great chameleon. And again, I started saying this like hours ago now, and I never finished the thought when I was traveling in the astral plane. Well, it's actually, it was a dream that I awoke in that dream. Sorry. I was having a dream that someone was ransacking my space, my apartment, my living room slash, you want to call it a man cave. That's the easiest way to call it. So a demon, right, was ransacking my man cave in my dream. So I woke up from that dream, right? So now I was awake, and I came out of the bedroom into the man cave, and everything was in ramshackles. It was completely ransacked, right? Like a thief or a burglar had come in and ransacked it. But I knew that it was fear. I knew it was my demon that came and ransacked my place, right, while I was sleeping. But I saw him in my dream doing it. So when I woke up, I came out here, my whole space was completely ransacked, and I knew it was the demon. And I said, I challenged him. I called out to him to come and face me, mano y mano. Oh, I said it as in the most sarcastic, goading, like child, childlike recess voice. Ooh, you're scared, like that, right? Like when you would be teasing somebody in elementary school at recess who didn't want to do something or didn't want to fight you. You would say, ooh, like you would say, fraidy cat, like you would make fun of them. You'd be goading them on, and you'd be accusing them of being a coward and being afraid, right? And you would use that snarky, that tone of voice. You're scared. You don't want to come fight me, blah, 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 right? And I was doing that, trying to goad the demon to come out of the shadows, to come out from wherever he was hiding and face me, mano y mano. And of course, he never did. Why not? He's a demon. He's a demon. What the hell was I going to do? But it's fear. Fear has no courage, right? All fear can do is be afraid. What that means is, now put yourself in the shoes. Imagine you are an entity. You are a being that is pure fear. And you mostly, so you're afraid of everything. All you can do is be afraid. That is your nature. That's it's like you're a machine, you're an algorithm. You're like an AI entity, but all you experience at any point ever is fear. And the desire to control outcomes. And one of the outcomes that you desire to control is your own survival. Right? So wouldn't it make perfect sense for an entity like that to be able to camouflage itself, to be able to assume whatever identity and become whatever it needed to be in order to hide, in order to blend in, or in order to achieve the outcome that it wanted to achieve? Why do animals have camouflage? Why does a chameleon transform its colors to match the background, right? Because it's camouflage. To remain hidden. Coming back to my story, I was goading and I was demanding that the demon show up, but my place was completely ransacked, right? And then I woke up in my bed and I ran out here and everything was fine. It was a dream within a dream. I was having a dream. I woke up in that dream. But I was still in a dream. So I woke up from a dream within a dream. I was having a dream within a dream that I woke up from, and that's, when my room was still ransacked. But then I was already awake in that dream, but I didn't altogether know I was dreaming. So I wasn't altogether certain that I was in the astral plane. So then when I woke from that dream, and I quickly ran out here to see whether my room was really ransacked or not. And of course it wasn't. So that's just finishing off that story. But the point is that why fear is the chameleon? Because it has to be. It has to be. In the same way that a chameleon is what it is and has that ability, or an octopus, right? The cephalopods in general have this incredible ability to not just change their colors to match their surroundings, but they can change the texture of their skin to match their surroundings. It's camouflage. And, calling fear the great chameleon, it might be better to call fear the octopus of egos, because there's the other thing that the octopus is a ambush predator. And the other thing that the octopus will do is to entangle and suffocate, right? It has those suction cups, and it has a beak, and then when it's really threatened and it's being chased, it has ink, right? It can squirt out ink to obscure the predator that's trying to chase it. And an octopus is super intelligent among the animal kingdom. Octopi are incredibly intelligent, very versatile, and they can squeeze into all sorts of tight places. They can problem solve. They can change their appearance. They can mimic other sea life. And octopus also happens to be preferred prey for many predators in the ocean. I mean, even humans like calamari and like octopus, right? So many mammals and other predators in the ocean, especially moray eels, they love octopus meat. Octopus meat, they're all muscle, right? They're very healthy. It's very nutritious. So it makes sense then that the octopus has all of these defensive mechanisms, that it's even a greater chameleon than the chameleon on land. So perhaps that is the better analogy for me to utilize. And serendipitously, I happened to watch, begin watching a documentary series on the octopus on Prime Video. So that also happened this past week. So all of these synchronicities are taking place simultaneously. So as you can tell by now, we're closing up on the 3-hour mark. Fear is not some trifle, and it's not to be trifled with. It is not some what people downplay it, and people really don't understand or appreciate just how all pervasive fear is. And they also don't appreciate its many, many, many guises and its many, many, many faces. And the more time I spend meditating on, writing about, and now today speaking about this phenomenon, the more self-evident it becomes. I have 50 years of experience intimately observing, living with, and battling this demon. I have an opportunity here, and the inspiration. I have been given the assignment to write a book on fear. So I may as well write the definitive work on fear. So I may as well dispense with the notion of a nice little neat, handy, nifty handbook and disclose or reveal, unveil, but expose fear in all of its guises, and offer that revelation to humanity who desperately, desperately needs to be made aware of it. Because what's coming, if people don't start to get a handle on their fear, what's coming is gonna destroy them. Their own fear will be the end of them, because they will not be able to handle the loss of comfort and security and control over their destiny, let alone be able to face the actual imminent disasters that may befall them or their family or their community or their nation or the world at large. And it is utterly naive and foolish to believe that people aren't afraid. You see, because through its many faces and through the many so-called innocuous indulgences of these hidden faces of fear, these masks that people remain ignorant of, especially the younger generations, the millennials and Gen Z, who have been indulging their fear their entire life and never facing it. The fear within them are like a ticking time bomb. That fear has been biding its time. Oh, it's been taking it easy, relaxing, indulging in all of this comfort and security, right? That makes fear itself lazy. Doesn't have to do any work, right? It's just being fed. It's just being fed, and it's being worshipped. It's being indulged. It doesn't have to do any work. But if all of a sudden that comfort and security is taken away from that demon of fear, holy shit. Now that demon of fear is going to leap into action. The incidence of panic attacks and people just absolutely losing their mind is going to go off the charts. Just because their comfort and security has been taken away, or their comfort and security is being put at risk. The fear is going to take over. Fear is going to take control. And when people possessed by fear are in a mode of trying to dominate and get control, well, then all hell breaks loose. Because now it's, domination, control at the expense of others. People need to be made aware of these dynamics. People need to be made, it needs to be spelled out for them. Somebody's got to do it. And well, it seems through my life and experience and the assignment that I've received, it's fairly clear that, whether or not I'm successful is another question, but I have to try. And in all my travels, I have never heard anyone or read anything that even begins to approach the comprehensive view of fear that I have, that I've been sharing with you today, and that I am able to put to paper, that I'm able to put on the page. And just given the experience that I have, and everybody knows this intuitively, even people in the new age know it intuitively, that they just put it on a balance scale. They say on one hand you have love, and on the other hand you have fear, and the fear is the opposite of love, and all you got to do is exchange fear for love and everything will be grand and happy or whatever. Okay, but at least intuitively they know that fear is the great dominant ego. And Master Samael, God bless him, who focused so much on lust and white tantra. Now, he was here, he had to give the message that he had to give. And I'm here to give the message that I have to give. Lust has a consort. If lust, Lilith, is the whore of Babylon, every whore has a pimp. And that's fear. So we can't talk about the fall of Babylon. We can't talk about the destruction of humanity, the apocalypse, or the downfall of this humanity, talking about lust alone, desire alone. No. Master Samael admitted that fear was the greatest ego he had to overcome. Every bodhisattva must come face to face with fear. Fear is the antithesis of the bodhisattva. For someone on the path of the bodhisattva, yes, lust is a terrible, treacherous, and difficult ego to overcome. Absolutely. But the greatest, most difficult ego to overcome is fear. And I've experienced that. That's true from my experience. And Master Samael wrote in words that was his experience as well. Because the path of the Bodhisattva is a path of suffering and sacrifice for humanity that culminates in death, the death of the self. Well, that's what fear is, self-preservation, right? You cannot be on the path of the razor's edge. You cannot be on the path of psychological death, the death of the false self, without being confronted by slamming into the head on into the wall of self-preservation. It's just self-evident, right? Because lust, at the end of the day, lust, yeah, there's an element of self-satisfaction in lust, but lust is there for preservation of the species and for the passing on of one's seed, the preservation of one's line, one's genetic line, one's bloodline, one's name, right? So But that's pride. There's a reason why, lions are called prides. But the preservation of the self is the wheelhouse of fear, which means that, and all of you, any of you who are practicing scientific chastity and you are conserving your sexual force, you know that's overcoming lust is easy is not the right word. But when you face the prospect of death, and I don't mean like theoretically, intellectually, I mean you meditate on death. You meditate on psychological death. Your personality, this self that you identify with, ceasing to exist. There's something there that shows up and says, "Yeah, I don't think so. I don't like this plan. I don't like this route." That's fear's job, is to preserve that self, to preserve that life for as long as it can. Which is another thing that I'm going to be writing about and talking about. Have you noticed all the videos on YouTube talking about longevity and longevity science? And we began this year. Remember way back in January, that Netflix documentary on Brian Johnson, right? The so-called healthiest man in the world, who's going to be extending his life and everything else, right? We began that back in January. Fear of death. Fear of death. And the desire to control how long you live and extend that lifespan as far as possible. That's dominance and control, to dominate death. Anyway, 3 hours, and I'm sure you can gather by now how we could probably go for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 hours on this subject and just keep it right on going. But I'm going to spare you all that. Today, treat it like a kind of a preview, a kind of a laying it on the line, and me making a commitment, a promise to all of you and to the world that I have been given this task and that I am taking it very, very, very seriously. And they say, write what you know. Well, I know what I know. I've got 50 years of experience. I may be the world expert, the world leading expert on fear. I am going to undertake this divine assignment, this divinely inspired enterprise, under the assumption, rightly or wrongly, that I possess the greatest body of self-evident experiential knowledge regarding the ego of fear, the demon of fear, and that it would be criminal for me not to record, not to document with as much clarity and comprehensiveness that I can, in the most practical and applicable way to the largest number of people, and make it relevant and actionable in their lives. That brings about this whole, handbook aspect of it. So, like, if fear is the great chameleon and the great octopus, and it wears all these many faces, then I will undertake the writing of this book that every last man, woman, and child who picks it up will see themselves in it and find something of relevance in their own life. It's time to take the masks off. It's time to expose. It's time to flick on the light in the darkness and expose the cockroaches that have been having their way in the dark. And that undertaking necessitates and deserves a proper publisher, a proper act of publishing. It deserves video content. It deserves the expose. It deserves to reach as many people as it can. And so I will not, unless there is no other way, I will not be pursuing the self-publishing route willy-nilly. This is too important. I will seek to find a publisher to work with, and that may mean I will need an agent. I will have to find an agent to work with first, and it may mean that I won't be able to get an agent unless I have 100,000 people following me on YouTube or Facebook or whatever. So that may mean that I might be waking up every morning at 3 or 4 a.m. to work on the book for 3 or 4 hours, but then the rest of the day may be spent making memes and working on videos and trying to build up that following in order so that I can maybe Instagram and whatever and X, whatever it's called, to create that following or build up that following like I once had with Attlas Information on Facebook. I once had over 10,000 people following me there. And that might give me the wherewithal to be able to find the right agent to put me in front of the right publisher or whatever. But the point is that with this particular enterprise, and then from another point of view, it needs to be published, and it just needs to maybe work with a publisher who focuses on books that are targeted towards those individuals that I've often referred to as whales, the elites. But from the top of the mountain to the bottom of the valley, everybody suffers from fear, and I've been living with this demon. This is the reason. Why I've suffered and fought, and to a large degree overcome this demon, because it is the epidemic. It is the true pandemic in humanity. And this has to be my work and my mission for the next few years while, as I said, things start crumbling and people need to start facing their fear. So I'm going to leave it at that today. Although, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to. I'll give you a few minutes to type them. keep in mind that it is not my intention, it is not my plan to make this topic the only thing that we discuss here on Sundays. But I also hope you will understand and appreciate if on occasion I do explore, perhaps in more detail or some aspect of this topic again, maybe in more detail or more, and maybe it'll be that circumstances and events cause me to do so. But I don't want you to think that this is now going to be, the fear channel, because that's not it. That's not it. Benjamin says, J. Krishnamurti once said that fear exists only when thought projects itself forward or backwards. To me, this implies that fear is essentially a construct of the mind, a product of thought. I really appreciate your earlier explanation. It was a thoughtful and insightful take on the nature of fear. I'd love to hear more of your perspective on this. All egos are in the future or in the past, because they don't exist. They're all an illusion, right? They are not being. To be means to be in the present, to be here now. So this is not exclusive to fear. This is the same with any desire. Pride, envy, gluttony, shame, regret, like desire. That's the whole point of desire. To desire, to dethrone. Your being, your sire, is here and now in the present. To be, that's being. So desire, to dethrone, means to be in the future or in the past. And yes, the mind is the vehicle to that. So Krishnamurti is not incorrect. It's just, he's just putting the cart before the horse here. And to say that fear is essentially a construct of the mind, it is and it isn't. It is and it isn't. The fears themselves are constructs of the mind. But the fear that fears is it's an illusory phenomenon that has a very real consequence. So it's effectively a real phenomenon. The Black Lodge is real. It needs to be, in as far as this reality is concerned. On the chessboard, the black pieces are as real as the white. In reality, there's only a player and an opponent. The player and the opponent are real. chess is an illusion. It's a game. But while you're playing it, the actions and the consequences on the board are very real. They have very real results on the board that result in an effect on the players. So this Krishnamurti, this sort of existential philosophical level, I try to be far more practical, right? Because we can get into existentialism and high philosophy, and we can we can do that, and we can spend hours talking about it. But when it comes to your life, and when it comes to making changes and your spiritual growth and awakening, is the high intellectual philosophical approach going to help you make practical, meaningful change? Or is it more practical and meaningful to recognize, all the many faces of that particular demon and how it affects you, and its modus operandi, and its tricks, and its tactics? In other words, you can read dozens of books on the philosophy and the history and even the esotericism of chess. But if you don't study openings and mid games and end games, and if you don't become intimately familiar with how the pieces move and how they create positions and discovered attacks and forked attacks and sacrifices and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, then you'll never be able to win at the game. You'll never be able to defeat your opponent. So, I try to help you guys play the chess game between yourselves and your own egos. What stands between you and your higher self. The game that your higher self is here to play and win. So just not taking anything away from Krishnamurti, just a different approach. That's all. And Benjamin says, "Thank you for your response. What you said really resonated with me. The phrase 'they egos are not being' carried a lot of depth and offered real insight. It gave me a lot to reflect on. Thanks." Well, you're welcome, Benjamin. Thank you for bringing it up. You always know what to ask or what to bring to the conversation to move us forward. So thank you for that. Does anybody else have any questions or comments? Because then, if not, I will wish you all a good week, and step forth in self-observation. Hopefully, you learned something today about the many faces of fear, and hopefully you'll be able to recognize some of these faces, some of these masks yourself as you move forward, and that you always go boldly and tap into the courage of your higher self. Really, really cultivate that sense of the quiet confidence that comes through oneness with your being. So if you're always observing yourself and remembering yourself and not identifying with the false self and all the machinations of your ego mind and your inferior emotions and sensations, then it's like Benjamin says here, when you're the more time you spend with your being, the less the influence of egos will have over you to keep you trapped in not being, right? To keep you trapped in the future or in the past or in desire or in regret, etc., etc., etc. All the modalities that egos use to ensnare you and enslave you. So thank you again, one and all. I look forward to seeing you next week. I pray that that what seems to be escalating on the world stage does so with the minimum amount of tragedy. And again, until next week, be well. And as always, inferential peace. Take care, everyone.